Sometimes, a single phrase spoken live can change everything. It can transform a casual conversation into a viral moment. It can catch millions of people completely off guard. And it can create a mystery that will leave the entire world asking, "Why did she say that?" You can sense that something extraordinary is about to happen when one of the most admired women in the sports world sits before live cameras, completely relaxed, having no idea that the next words that will come out of her mouth will create one of the biggest relationship controversies in recent history. Ayesha Curry was no stranger to the spotlight. As the wife of Steph Curry, one of basketball's greatest living legends, she had learned to navigate the public world with grace and authenticity. Successful businesswoman, dedicated mother, media personality, she had built her own identity, independent of her husband's fame. But on that specific afternoon, during a live interview that seemed perfectly ordinary, something happened that no one, absolutely no one, was prepared to hear. The atmosphere in the studio was light, relaxed. The interviewer conducted the conversation skillfully, touching on topics about family, career, and of course, her relationship with Steph. These were questions that Ayesha had answered hundreds of times before. Familiar territory, safe. And then came the question that would change everything. Ayesha, tell us about when you first met Steph. Was it love at first sight? It was the kind of romantic question that everyone loves to hear. The kind of fairy tale love story that people expect from such a publicly admired couple. The answer should have been sweet, charming, perhaps a little shy. But what Ayesha said next left the room completely frozen. "Honestly," she said with a casual smile, as if she were sharing a funny secret with friends, "Steph wasn't my type." The silence that followed was deafening. You could feel the shock rippling through the studio like an electric wave. The interviewer blinked rapidly, as if she wasn't sure she had heard correctly. Production members backstage froze in their places, and millions of people watching live felt their jaws dropping simultaneously. How is it possible for someone to say live, for the entire world to hear, that her husband, the man with whom she built a beautiful family, the man who is admired by millions, wasn't her type? But Ayesha didn't stop there. As if she didn't realize the bomb she had just dropped, she continued speaking with the same naturalness. "Seriously, when I met him, I wasn't impressed physically. It wasn't that, 'Wow, I need to meet this guy' thing. It was pretty normal." It was impossible not to feel the tension growing exponentially with each word. The interviewer tried to maintain professional composure, but you could see the surprise stamped on her face. And then, as if the universe were orchestrating the perfect moment of drama, the camera captured something that made millions of hearts stop. Steph Curry was watching the interview live from backstage. The expression on his face was a complex mixture of surprise, embarrassment, and perhaps a touch of uncomfortable humor. It was like watching someone process in real time the fact that his wife had just said on national television that he wasn't attractive to her initially. What's most impressive is how that moment was captured in all its raw authenticity. There was no editing. There was no going back. The words were out there, broadcast to millions of people, and there was no way to undo them. Naturally, this leads us to what happened in the minutes immediately following. Because in the modern world of social media, nothing remains private or isolated for very long. While the interview was still happening, Twitter exploded. Instagram collapsed with comments. TikTok was flooded with reactions. It was like watching a digital fire spreading at the speed of light. The comments ranged from shocked to outraged, from amused to deeply offended. Did she really just say that in front of the whole world? Imagine being Steph Curry and hearing your wife say you weren't her type, Liv. Was that disrespectful or honest? I can't decide. Steph deserves better than that. What a lack of class. People, this is real. She actually said that. Have you ever wondered how a phrase can divide millions of people in a matter of seconds? The division was crystal clear. On one side, there were those who found Ayesha's honesty refreshing and romantic. The idea that true love transcends initial physical attraction. On the other side, there was a furious crowd that considered the comment profoundly disrespectful to Steph. Hashtags began sprouting like mushrooms after rain. Ayesha Curry. Not his type. Steph deserves better. Real love. Each one representing a different camp in this instant cultural war. Celebrities began weighing in, some defending Ayesha, others questioning her choice of words. Most just shocked that this had actually happened. "I can't believe I just watched that live," tweeted a well-known sports commentator. The silence in the studio was painful. Radio shows canceled planned segments to discuss exclusively Ayesha's comment. Podcasts recorded emergency episodes. Tabloids prepared sensationalist headlines. But what really transformed this, from a viral moment into a cultural phenomenon, was the mystery that began forming in everyone's minds. Why? Why would Ayesha Curry choose to say this publicly? Why didn't she anticipate how it would sound? And more importantly, what was the complete story behind that seemingly casual statement? It was impossible not to notice that there was more to this story than what appeared on the surface. Ayesha wasn't known for making careless statements or seeking negative attention. So why say something so potentially damaging live? Theories began circulating like viruses. Maybe their relationship is in trouble. She was trying to be too authentic and didn't think about the consequences. There has to be more context. This can't be the whole story. Steph must be mortified. Imagine hearing this publicly. What's most impressive is how that single moment captured something deep about our modern culture. Our obsession with celebrity relationships, our need to judge and take sides, our inability to accept nuances or wait for complete context before forming opinions. While the world exploded in debates, one person remained notably silent: Ayesha Curry herself. After the interview ended, she posted nothing on social media. She issued no statements. She didn't try to clarify or apologize. It was as if she had completely disappeared from the public radar. And Steph? He also chose silence. No tweets, no comments, just nothing. This collective silence from the Curry couple only intensified the speculation. It was like pouring gasoline on an already out-of-control fire. The fact that they're not saying anything speaks volumes. This silence is deafening. Something is happening behind the scenes. Maybe they're dealing with this privately, as they should. Have you ever wondered how silence can be louder than any words? Days turned into weeks. The story didn't disappear as everyone expected. If anything, it gained more momentum, more analyses, more debates, more people taking sides in a battle they didn't fully understand. Relationship experts were called to give opinions on morning shows. Therapists analyzed the concerning dynamic of the comment. Media coaches discussed the public relations disaster. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a theory. But no one had the truth. Because the truth, the real truth behind those words that shocked the world, was something that no one had even considered. It was a story that would completely transform the perception of that viral moment. But that truth was still locked in Ayesha Curry's heart, and she wasn't ready to share it yet. Naturally, this leads us to what happened during those weeks of deafening silence. The weeks when pressure accumulated like steam in a pot, without a release valve. The weeks when Ayesha faced an impossible choice: continue in silence, or finally reveal what was really behind that shocking statement. It was impossible not to feel that something was about to explode, that this silence couldn't last forever, that eventually the truth would have to come out. And when it came, when Ayesha Curry finally broke that deafening silence, the world would discover they were completely wrong about everything. The confession had shocked millions, but the truth behind it was about to surprise absolutely everyone. The days that followed the shocking confession were like living in a hurricane of judgments. And at the center of that hurricane, completely alone and in silence, was Ayesha Curry, trying to breathe while the world collapsed around her. You can sense that something is profoundly wrong when a person known for her authenticity and active presence on social media suddenly disappears completely from the public radar, as if she had been swallowed by the earth. Ayesha posted nothing, not a photo, not an inspirational message, not even an emoji. Her social media accounts, normally vibrant and full of life, became pages frozen in time. The last post? Hours before the fateful interview. It was like watching someone hide from the entire world. But the world wasn't willing to leave her alone. If anything, her silence only intensified the collective obsession. Because in the vacuum of information, people fill the empty spaces with their own narratives, and the narratives that formed were brutal. She knows she messed up and is hiding in shame. Their marriage is over. I'd bet anything. Steph is probably furious. Who wouldn't be? She showed who she really is. No class. The criticisms came like relentless waves. Comment after comment, post after post, video after video. Influencers making 20-minute analyses about what this revealed about Ayesha's character. Podcasters dedicating entire episodes speculating about the state of the Curry marriage. It was impossible not to feel the crushing weight of that avalanche of public judgment. Millions of people who had never met Ayesha personally felt qualified to dissect her soul, question her intentions, and condemn her words. But what the world didn't see were the tears she cried alone in her room. The psychological weight of carrying so much hostility directed at you, the pain of being completely misinterpreted by millions of people who thought they knew the whole story. How is it possible that words spoken without malice can be transformed into weapons against you? The pressure didn't just come from anonymous social media. Respectable news outlets dedicated entire segments to the Curry scandal. Relationship psychologists were invited to analyze the problematic dynamic that the comment supposedly revealed. What does this tell us about how she really views her husband? Is there unresolved resentment in the relationship? How can Steph recover from this public humiliation? Each analysis cut deeper. Each speculation added more weight to the burden Ayesha carried. And through all of this, silence. From her, from Steph, from the entire Curry family. Naturally, this leads us to what was really happening behind the scenes. Because while the world built dramatic narratives, the truth was simultaneously simpler and more complicated than anyone imagined. Ayesha wasn't hiding in shame. She was trying to process how something so honest and, in her mind, so harmless had been distorted into something so ugly. She was trying to understand how to protect her family from the storm she had inadvertently created. And Steph? contrary to the furious speculations, he wasn't angry with her. He was worried. Worried about the pressure he saw his wife facing. Worried about how to protect their children from online toxicity. Worried about how to handle a situation that had completely spiraled out of control. But they agreed on one thing. Silence, for now, was the best strategy. Let the storm pass. Don't feed the fire with more fuel. Wait for the world to eventually find something else to obsess over. Except the storm wasn't passing. It was intensifying. Have you ever wondered how long a person can endure being the target of millions of negative opinions before breaking? 2 weeks after the interview, something changed. Ayesha was at home, trying to maintain some appearance of normalcy for her children, when her phone began exploding with a new wave of notifications. A tabloid had published a speculative article with a devastating headline, "Close Sources Reveal: Curry Marriage in Crisis After Shocking Comment." The article was filled with anonymous sources claiming that Steph was deeply hurt and that the couple was considering urgent marriage therapy. None of it was true, but truth rarely matters when the narrative is more interesting. And this article did something that all the other criticisms hadn't managed. It touched their children. When her daughter came to her crying, asking if mommy and daddy were going to separate because she had read something online, Ayesha felt something breaking inside her chest. It wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't just about reputation or pride. It was about protecting the innocent human beings she had brought into the world. What's most impressive is how that moment of fragility with her daughter became the catalyst for something bigger. Because sometimes the most powerful motivation isn't defending yourself, it's protecting those you love. That night, Ayesha had a long conversation with Steph, not about whether he was hurt by the comment. They had already resolved that privately, but about whether it was time to break the silence, whether it was time to tell the complete truth that would put everything in context. Steph, always her biggest supporter, said something that changed everything. The world doesn't need an explanation from you, but if you feel you need to share your truth, I'm here by your side. Always. It was impossible not to feel the genuine love behind those words. In a moment where many partners could be resentful or defensive, Steph was offering unconditional support. And it was in this moment of vulnerability and love that Ayesha made a decision. A decision that would surprise the world and completely transform the narrative that had been built. She would break the silence, but not with a carefully crafted corporate statement, not with an apology she didn't feel she owed, not with defensive justifications. She would tell the truth. The complete truth about what that phrase, "he wasn't my type," really meant. The truth that would contextualize everything. The truth that no one had asked about or considered in their rush to judge. Naturally, this leads us to the final days before the revelation. The days when Ayesha carefully prepared how she would share her story. How she would ensure that this time there would be no room for misinterpretation. She didn't want attention. She didn't want additional drama. She simply wanted people to understand that love, true and lasting love, is much more complex and beautiful than anyone had imagined when hearing that phrase out of context. The pressure from the previous weeks had been almost unbearable. The criticisms had cut deeply. The judgment had weighed on her soul. But through all of it, something crystallized in her mind. The truth always deserves to be told, even when it's easier to remain silent, even when you know some people will never really hear it, even when it's scary to expose yourself again after being so brutally misinterpreted. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to know that millions of people have the story completely wrong about you? That was exactly what Ayesha had lived through for weeks. And now she was about to do something brave, set the record straight. Not out of pride, not for reputation, but because the truth, the real and beautiful truth behind that confession, deserved to be known. Because when you understood what she really meant, when you knew the complete context, when you heard the story she never had a chance to tell in that interview, everything would make sense in a way that would completely transform your understanding. The silence was about to be broken. And when Ayesha Curry finally spoke, when she revealed the true reason behind those words that shocked the world, everyone would understand that they had judged something they never truly comprehended. The truth was coming, and it was more surprising, deeper, and more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. And then came the moment that would change everything. The moment when Ayesha Curry would decide not just to break the silence, but to reveal a truth so profound and unexpected that it would completely transform the way millions of people understood love, attraction, and relationships. You can sense that something extraordinary is about to happen when someone who has been brutally misinterpreted finally decides to share the complete context that was missing from the beginning. Ayesha carefully chose how she would share her truth. It wouldn't be through tabloids or edited interviews. It would be through her own words, unfiltered, without intermediaries. She posted a video on her social media. Just her, sitting in her home, speaking directly to the camera, speaking directly to the hearts of millions of people. The video began quietly. Ayesha took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for words she had held for weeks. "I know everyone has been talking about what I said in the interview," she began, her voice calm but loaded with emotion. "And I understand why people were shocked. I really do understand. But what no one realized, what I didn't have a chance to explain in that moment, is what I really meant." It was impossible not to feel the absolute authenticity in her words. There was no defensiveness. There was no anger. Just a genuine desire to be understood. "When I said that Steph wasn't my type," she continued, "I was talking about something very specific. I was talking about the superficial and foolish standards I had when I was younger. And then came the revelation that would begin to change everything. You see, when I was 17, 18 years old, I had a mental list of what my ideal man should be like. He should be a certain height, a certain style, a certain appearance. It was a silly, superficial list based on movies and pop culture. It was the type that every young girl thinks she wants. Ayesha paused, and you could feel the weight of what would come next. And when I met Steph for the first time, he didn't fit that superficial list. He wasn't the type that young, immature girl had created in her head based on completely empty standards. How is it possible that an explanation can completely transform the meaning of words that seemed so clear? But Ayesha was just beginning, and what she said next made millions of hearts stop. "But here's the truth I was trying to share in the interview, and that came out completely without the context that would make everything clear," she said, her voice becoming more emotional. "Steph wasn't my superficial type, but he was exactly my type in everything that really matters." Tears began forming in her eyes as she continued, "He was my type in kindness, my type in integrity, my type in faith, my type in how he treated his family, my type in ambition and hard work, my type in humor and laughter, my type in values and character." What's most impressive is how each word was completely reconstructing the narrative the world had created. "The point I was trying to make," Ayesha explained, "is that true love, love that lasts, isn't about whether someone fits a superficial list of physical types that we create when we're young and immature. It's about discovering that the person who matters has exactly the kind of soul that your soul needs. Have you ever wondered how a single explanation can dismantle weeks of judgments and wrong conclusions? Ayesha didn't stop there. She was determined to tell the complete story. When I met Steph, I was 18 years old. He was 19. And I remember exactly the moment I realized that all my superficial types were completely irrelevant, she said, a smile through the tears. It was in our third conversation. We were talking about our dreams, our families, our faith. And I remember looking at him and thinking, this man isn't what I thought I wanted. He's everything I really need. It was impossible not to feel the genuine depth of that moment she was sharing. That was the moment, she continued, when I understood that my type had never been about height or appearance or anything physical. My type was someone who made me want to be a better person, someone whose values aligned perfectly with mine, someone with whom I could build a life based on true love, not superficial attraction. Naturally, this leads us to the heart of the revelation that was changing everything, because Ayesha was about to articulate something that most people struggle to understand about true love. What I was trying to say in that interview, she explained with absolute clarity, is that I'm grateful every day that Steph wasn't my superficial type. Because if he had been, if I had chosen him based on that silly list, I would have chosen for the wrong reasons. She let that sink in for a moment. But instead, I chose Steph. And he chose me, based on something infinitely deeper. We built our love on a foundation of friendship, respect, shared values, and a connection of souls that completely transcends any physical type. What's most impressive is how this explanation wasn't just about defending her comment. It was a masterclass on the nature of lasting love. So, when I said he wasn't my type, Ayesha concluded, I was celebrating the fact that true love doesn't fit in predefined boxes. I was celebrating that I found someone who was exactly what my soul needed, even though he wasn't what my immature 18-year-old mind thought I wanted. She looked directly at the camera, as if speaking personally to each person watching. And to Steph, she said, her voice breaking slightly with emotion, if you're watching this, you've always been my type in kindness, my type in love, my type in partnership, my type in everything that builds a real and lasting life. And then she revealed something that made the entire world stop. Actually, Steph and I laugh about this often. He always jokes that it was his incredible personality that had to compensate for him not being my initial type, she said, with a genuine smile. And I always respond, no, you were always my type. It just took 3 days for my young mind to catch up with what my heart already knew. It was impossible not to notice how that revelation completely transformed everything. The comment that had seemed disrespectful was actually one of the most profound declarations of love anyone could make. I regret that my comment was interpreted so differently from what I meant, Ayesha concluded, but I don't regret the truth behind it. Because that truth, that real love, transcends superficial types, is the most beautiful truth I know. The video ended, and the world that had spent weeks judging fell completely silent, processing, because suddenly, everything made sense. Every word that had seemed confusing or offensive now shone with a completely different meaning, deeper, more beautiful, more real. The social media that had exploded with criticism now exploded with something completely different. Understanding. tears, epiphanies about their own relationships. I got it all wrong. Completely wrong. This is the most beautiful thing about love I've ever heard. She wasn't disrespecting him. She was celebrating true love. Now I understand. And now I'm crying. Have you ever wondered how truth can completely transform the perception of millions of people in a matter of minutes? Relationship experts who had criticized her comment now walked back their words. We jumped to conclusions without context. She was actually expressing something profound about emotional maturity and true love. Celebrities who had taken sides now posted reflections about their own types and how true love had surprised them too. But the most important reaction came from Steph Curry. He posted a simple photo of him and Ayesha with a caption that made the world melt. "You've always been my type too. In everything that matters. Yesterday, today, and forever." It was impossible not to feel the genuine and unshakable love that those words carried. What's most impressive is how a truth, when finally revealed, can not only transform perceptions, but teach lessons that millions needed to hear. Because Ayesha hadn't just defended her words, she had given the world a profound lesson about the difference between superficial attraction and true love, about the difference between types based on empty cultural standards and compatibility based on values and character. Naturally, this leads us to understand that the impact of that revelation went far beyond simply clarifying a misunderstanding. She had initiated a global conversation about what really matters in lasting relationships. The truth had surprised everyone. Not because it was complicated, but because it was profoundly simple. True love doesn't fit in predefined types. True love creates its own type. Unique, customized, perfect for the two souls involved. And the world was about to discover that this simple yet profound truth would change not just how they saw Ayesha and Steph, but how they saw their own relationships and possibilities for love. The days that followed Ayesha's revelation were nothing short of magical in their quality of collective transformation. It was like watching millions of people having simultaneous epiphanies about love, relationships, and what really matters when we choose a partner for life. You can sense that something profound changed in the collective consciousness when a story that began with outrage and judgment ends with tears of understanding and gratitude. The same social media that had exploded with brutal criticism were now flooded with something completely different: personal reflections, emotional revelations, and love stories that mirrored exactly what Ayesha had shared. My husband wasn't my type when I met him. I thought I wanted an athletic and extroverted guy. He was quiet and more nerdy. But he was my type in kindness, in loyalty, in how he makes me laugh every day. Thank you for reminding me of this, Ayesha. I almost lost the love of my life because she didn't fit my superficial list. God helped me see what really mattered. Married for 15 years now, this story touched my soul. At 22 years old, I had a very specific type. At 32, I married someone completely different, and he's the best man I've ever met. Types change when you mature. It was impossible not to feel how Ayesha's revelation had touched something universal in human experience. The struggle between what we think we want and what we really need. The journey of emotional maturity that leads from superficiality to depth. What's most impressive is how therapists and relationship counselors began using Ayesha's story as a teaching tool. Not as a celebrity scandal, but as a perfect example of communication about mature love. A couples psychologist in New York posted, I use Ayesha Curry's story with my clients now. She perfectly articulates the difference between initial attraction based on cultural standards and lasting compatibility based on shared values. This is doctoral-level relationship psychology explained in a way everyone understands. A therapist in Texas shared, "How many marriages end because people chose based on superficial types and later discover they have nothing in common in fundamental values?" Isha's story teaches the lesson I've been trying to teach for years. Choose soul compatibility, not list compatibility. Naturally, this leads us to the impact the revelation had on young people who were precisely at that phase of creating their own superficial lists of ideal types. A 19-year-old college student wrote a viral thread on Twitter, "I had a literal list on my phone of what my perfect boyfriend should be like. Minimum height, eye color, hairstyle, type of car he should drive. After hearing Ayesha Curry, I deleted that list because I realized I was looking for an accessory, not a partner." A 21-year-old young man shared, "I always rejected girls who didn't fit my physical type. Now I realize how many incredible connections I probably lost because of foolish standards. Thank you for this lesson, Curry family." How is it possible that a misinterpreted confession transforms into one of the most powerful lessons about love that a generation received? The answer was in the absolute authenticity with which Ayesha shared her truth. She didn't try to be perfect. She didn't try to hide that she had been superficial when young. She embraced her growth journey and, in doing so, gave permission to millions of people to recognize their own journeys. But perhaps the most profound impact was on people's own relationships. Couples who had been together for years began having conversations they had never had before. A man married for 10 years shared, "I asked my wife if I was her type when we met. She laughed and said, 'Absolutely not.' Then we had the most beautiful conversation about what really attracted us to each other. It was like falling in love again in a deeper way." A woman posted through tears in a video, "My husband wasn't my physical type, but he's my type in everything else. And after hearing Ayesha, I finally managed to articulate this to him. He cried. I cried. Our marriage has never been stronger." Have you ever wondered how a truth shared courageously can create waves of healing in relationships around the entire world? The impact went beyond romantic relationships. Parents began using the story to teach their teenage children about values versus appearance. Teachers incorporated the narrative into classes about emotional intelligence and decision-making. A mother shared, "My 16-year-old daughter was obsessed with only dating popular and handsome boys. I showed her Ayesha's video. Now she's dating a boy she said wasn't her type, but is the kindest in school. She's happy in a way I've never seen before." A high school teacher posted, "I used Ayesha Curry's story in a class about personal values versus social pressure. My students had one of the most mature discussions I've ever witnessed about what they really seek in relationships. Some even admitted their lists were based on friends' approval, not real happiness." Naturally, this leads us to what happened between Ayesha and Steph after this entire journey. Because while the world learned profound lessons, the Curry couple was living their own transformation. In an interview months later, Steph shared something that made the world melt. "I always knew what Ayesha meant. There was never doubt in my mind. But seeing the world finally understand, seeing millions of people having conversations about true love because of her courage to be vulnerable, that made me love her even more." Ayesha added, "This experience taught us something precious. That vulnerability, even when it's initially misinterpreted, eventually leads to truth. and truth is always worth defending. What's most impressive is how they transformed something that could have damaged their relationship into something that strengthened it exponentially. We talk more deeply now, Ayesha revealed, about everything, because we realize that assuming the other understands without fully explaining can lead to misunderstandings. And we also realize that even when the entire world misinterprets, if we both understand each other, that's what really matters. Steph added with a smile. And just for the record, she also wasn't my type when we met. My type was quieter, more reserved girls. Ayesha was vibrant, opinionated, full of life. But she was exactly the kind of energy and personality my soul needed. She completed me in ways I didn't even know I needed to be completed. It was impossible not to notice the genuine depth of love and partnership those words revealed. The story that had begun with shock and outrage transformed into one of the most inspiring narratives about mature love of the decade. Books were written analyzing the phenomenon, podcasts dedicated entire series exploring the lessons. Therapists developed workshops based on the principles the story illustrated. But perhaps the most beautiful legacy was the simplest. Countless couples who found courage to give someone who wasn't their superficial type a chance and discovered true love. A woman wrote 1 year later, "Exactly 1 year ago, I watched Ayesha's video and decided to give my co-worker who had always been kind to me, but wasn't my type, a chance. Today, I'm marrying him. He's my type in everything that really matters. Thank you for teaching me this, Ayesha." A man shared, "I was about to break up with my girlfriend because she didn't fit the mental image I had of my ideal wife. Then I heard Ayesha's story. I proposed to my girlfriend 2 months later. Best decision of my life." How is it possible to quantify the impact of a truth that literally changed life trajectories? Years later, when researchers study this moment of modern culture, they will find something fascinating. A measurable peak in successful relationships between people who didn't fit each other's traditional types. An increase in marriages based on value compatibility instead of initial physical attraction. And it all started with a misinterpreted confession that became a revelation that transformed perceptions. Have you ever wondered what the power of a courageously shared truth is? Ayesha and Steph Curry's story proved that truth, even when it's initially misinterpreted, even when it requires courage to defend it, even when the entire world is against you, is always worth being told. Because truth doesn't just free the one who speaks it. It frees everyone who hears it and recognizes their own truths reflected in it. The silence was broken. The truth was revealed. And the world never saw love the same way again. Ayesha Curry didn't want to create a revolution about relationships. She just wanted people to understand what she really meant. But in doing so, she gave the world an invaluable gift: permission to redefine types based on soul instead of surface, the courage to choose depth over appearance, the wisdom to understand that true love creates its own type, unique, perfect, lasting. And that lesson, that simple yet profound truth, will continue transforming lives for generations. Because in the end, we're all looking for the same thing: someone who is our type in kindness, our type in values, our type in soul. And when we find that person, we discover that type was never about appearance. It was always about soul compatibility, waiting to recognize each other. That was the truth that surprised everyone and changed everything.